Hello and welcome. My name is Brian McAvoy.
And I'm Tim Shank. This is Two Cyborgs and a Microphone.
Happy holidays if that's what you do. I got to come back to Minnesota for a week, so I'm in my usual recording space with my usual Two Cyborgs and a microphone mug, drinking tea. How about you, Tim? What are you drinking?
Well, I'm drinking sweet alcoholic coffee out of my Two Cyborgs and a Microphone mug.
I hope you had a nice holiday break and spent time with your family. Isn't that what it's all about?
That is. And, funny you should mention it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about life, the universe, and everything. It's episode 42.
Happy episode 42. Thanks, Douglas Adams. So long and thanks for all the fish. I'm sad that it should come to this.
Great. We might get copyright infringement or something. We're really talking about what it's all about. Let's start top of the list, right?
Yeah,
evolution.
Let's start with evolution. This is, very likely it's taught in just about every school now. At least it should be. The purpose, if you go by evolution, our purpose in being here is to preserve our genetic lineage.
Yeah. Is that the end of it? I mean, there's more to it. It's to preserve our genetic and to increase our population,
that's a pretty simple concept.
As to become more capable of maybe modifying our environment, right? Or at least existing in our environment.
Expanding your lineage and promoting humanity and stuff is basically what it comes down to is I want my seed to succeed. Ooh, that's catchy.
And it rhymes.
One part that this brings up is that consciousness is merely for survival. It just makes us better than a tiger at surviving.
Yeah. Well, in that context, in the context of evolution, pretty much everything is just for survival.
We don't have super sensitive fingertips because it lets us do electronic work. It's because it, helps us find food in small crevices.
I don't know if there's much to say about that. I mean, if that's the case, then
there really isn't.
Yeah, there's nothing to talk about. But now there's religion.
Then it gets a little stickier.
People for since the beginning of history have felt a greater purpose. And a lot of times that comes down to religion.
Yeah, and that's a good way to categorize it. And this counts for a lot of religion, not all of them. We're not trying to be all-inclusive here. We're just talking about the big ones, I suppose, the most popular. And the ideas that seem to be present in a lot of religions. Certain things like we're not tied to our corporeal bodies.
Along with that, death is not the end.
No, there's some immortal part of us that keeps going, whether it is reborn as another entity,
right,
or it goes to be judged or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what all the options are.
And if you talk to an atheist about that, they say that is all just fear-based thought. We can't imagine that our life is final. We just can't deal with that emotionally.
Which I get the reasoning behind that. There's no evidence of souls, but it helps you deal with the existential dread.
Sure.
So next, if you go by religion, we were created by something more powerful. We didn't spawn ourselves, and we're not going that we simply evolved from plasma in the proto-Earth.
Yeah, and one thing you said, and I didn't ask any questions about it. You said we were created for our own sake. What do you mean by that? That we were created for us?
If we're created by something bigger than us, in religion's point of view, it's saying that this benevolent being usually created us so that we would exist. Without his or her or its intervention, we would simply not be. But us existing is better for us than not existing.
I guess that is true.
We'll get into that in a little bit. We'll get into why that's worth bringing up here.
And that kind of also speaks to being intentional.
Yeah.
Being intentional.
Religion,
that there was a choice made.
Does say that, we were put here, that we weren't just left in the fridge too long and we suddenly became a civilization with art and philosophy.
Yeah. And then there's the concept of fate, destiny.
Yeah.
That we were given life to fulfill some grand goal, right? Some accomplishment.
I'd like to think that we were put here to create this podcast.
Uh-oh.
Now we're doing it. So we have our ticket to heaven or Valhalla.
I'm not ready to go, man.
I'm just saying we got our ticket because we're doing this.
Okay.
We're doing a bang-up job.
So, what if after we're done here, I'm shutting off my equipment and lightning strikes, I get electrocuted? I'm not ready.
Well, tough shit. I'll see you in the afterlife.
Right.
You don't have a choice.
You know where I stand on this stuff.
Yeah.
Because I brought it up before. We've talked about it.
We've had a whole show about this. One of my favorites.
I'm convinced that we are in a simulation of some kind.
Yes, and this is the point that I think a lot of other places don't bring up. It's usually, oh, we evolved,
Yeah, no.
or oh, we were created. So we've got a third idea.
And being in a simulation, that doesn't actually discount the other two ideas we've already talked about.
No, they could kind of coexist.
Well, if you look at almost all of the creation myths, there was an agent, an outside agent, that created a system and then created intelligence in the system. That, if you look at that concept objectively, that's a simulation. Whether or not you feel like you're part of that external agent or whatever, all the things that the emotional ties and all that stuff that comes with the religious mindset, if you can forego that, the essence of most of the creation myths, or the major ones, is of a simulation. A system created and then intelligent agents created within that system.
Oh yeah, the parallels between religion and the idea that we could have been created on somebody's PlayStation, there's more alike than dissimilar.
To me, it supports the argument that we are in a simulation, because most of the world throughout history has believed that we are in a simulation without using those words.
And maybe this is just the next fad religion that celebrities are going to jump on. Who knows?
Yeah,
and
you never know.
I think that calling it a religion, maybe that's accurate. Maybe that's not. But we're not worshiping the user. I fight for the user, but I don't worship him.
I mean, there's so much gray area in these types of topics that, the word religion, the base meanings of the words we're using, they can be taken in different ways. So it's really a difficult conversation to have a solid conversation on in the first place.
There's no proof. Where do you go from there? Like, yeah, we don't have proof of this. It's an interesting idea, and there's a pretty good likelihood. There's a minimum length we can observe. We can move something in a straight line, and we can observe it at one point, and we can observe it a little distance later, very, 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 very little, but we never observe it in the middle. Kind of like a pixel. Like, this pixel is lit, this pixel is blue. And then you say, okay, move that pixel over. Well, there's never a pixel in between there on your monitor. It's left or right.
This applies down to the components of atoms that they jump in and out of existence between points. So they, like you say, it could be pixels. There's also the hard speed limit on light, that we can't move anything past the speed of light. So that's another, there's a number of natural laws, physical laws, that, considered from one perspective, could be system or hardware limitations of a kind.
We're using hardware not in the sense that we are, some IBM PC running somewhere in what we would call the distant future. We're saying that, maybe this hardware is, the mind of a being that's so complex we can't even fathom it.
Right. I mean, there's no way for us. I mean, we look at the idea of simulation. We think of video games. And we think of video games, we think of kind of vulgar concepts that we're just now learning to develop. And simulation doesn't have to be in a silicon-based computer using light on a screen. There's a deeper type of simulation that we're talking about.
That's an analogy at this point.
Right.
Now, I would like to point out that, maybe this speed limits and this low resolution or whatever, maybe there's just a downfall of only being able to sense 3 spatial planes. I don't know.
No, that's a good point.
There could very well be explanations for this that we'll later go on and find, well, this was the reason.
Yeah, and as science goes on, the capability of science gets more and more, I guess, precise, that we can look smaller and smaller. So maybe we'll find something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very well could. Hopefully we do. Here's an interesting point I heard brought up once, that we can create simulations in our universe. Therefore, we're at least not in the bottom simulation. We could create a computer program that plays a computer program. We could say, okay, my Sims character is going to start playing Pong. The Pong is a simulation inside of a simulation inside of our simulation. At least we're not in the lowest rung. There's some hope for us.
What do you mean lowest rung? I mean, if from one perspective, what do you mean, would Pong be the lowest rung?
Yep. In this example.
Analogy there? Okay.
We're not in there.
Right. Okay. Well, I get your point.
Yeah, we could be 6 simulations down. We could be simulated in the mind of a giant forest god being imagined by a computer, being imagined by, a cosmic bird. I'm not proposing that any of this is true. I am just spouting utter nonsense.
No, I think that's solid, Brian.
Really?
I think that's solid.
Should I write it down?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm gonna go buy
write
a
it down and publish it.
Yeah. I'm gonna give the religious thing a shot. See how that works out for me. Another point of possibly being a simulation is that our physics, they're really simple rules. There's just a few basic concepts that are applied over and over and over.
Can you give an example of that?
Gravity. Gravity affects things at different levels differently. You've got the way subatomic particles interact with one another. Well, it's very similar to the way it acts on a planetary scale, which is similar to the way it acts on a galactic scale and a solar system scale and all these.
Okay.
Up the line. So it's that same
So
rule.
you're kind of talking about the concept of macrocosm, microcosm.
Yeah. And if you were going to write a program, isn't that how you do it? You just say, okay, here's some damn simple rules. Now propagate. Rather than saying, okay, I'm going to create 58,000 instances of the hydrogen atom for this microgram of matter. But here's one that should be a lot more obvious. How come we haven't encountered extraterrestrial life? If you were just straight up making a simulation and you were simulating the entire universe, every single atom, why hasn't life evolved somewhere else? This is Fermi's paradox. If you already know what that is, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
If we were, say, just going to simulate a planet and just, see what happens with a bunch of slightly evolved apes, why would you simulate 6 billion other races? Because that would just take a lot of processing power.
Absolutely. There's other ways to look at that too.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of explanations for Fermi's paradox. That could be its own show.
Hey, we should do that.
That'd be kind of a fun show. Maybe. Is that in our scope?
We've expanded out of our scope. We're way beyond human augmentation, right?
But if we're in a simulation, maybe we can just reprogram some matter to become awesome human parts, and we'll get them. Off to be the wizard. I just kind of want to plant the seed of we might be a simulation. What's that mean to you, our listeners? And what are you going to do? Are you going to do anything different?
Well, I think that's kind of the point. And when I talk to people about this, they struggle with understanding what does it matter? Because if you're in the simulation and all you can experience is the simulation and the only things you can modify are simulated things, what is the real point? What can you do with that?
Yeah, what if there is no red pill?
Besides just understand that it is happening. It's not functional information.
No, not really.
It's not like we can learn to code that. Maybe
it just adds to the existential dread.
Maybe.
I always happen to talk to people about that.
I guess that's it.
Yeah. So we'll invite our listeners to email us at cyborgs@twocyborgs.com. You can also shoot us an individual email, tim@twocyborgs.com or brian@twocyborgs.com.
Also check out our site, twocyborgs.com. On their site, we have our Cafe Press store where you can get the swanky hooded sweatshirt that Brian's wearing or the coffee cups that we're both drinking from.
This is Brian McAvoy, and I'm holding one of the mugs right now. I tried drinking on the air, and I hit my tooth, and I choked, and it was bad news.
And this is Tim Shank. You have been listening to Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by two cyborgs who do have microphones.
Like, follow, share, +1, and don't forget to subscribe on any of the popular podcast services, including Google Play Music, iTunes, and Stitcher. Help us move up the podcast ladder by subscribing and commenting on iTunes.
And now we're on Twitter @2cyborgs. That's the number 2 cyborgs.
We even gave you guys something to comment on. Tell us your thoughts about being in a simulation.